constructive methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
Hello, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo Podcast. Good morning, I hope you are having a wonderful day. I am having a wonderful day, as always, here behind the microphone at Chiro Business Mojo. You know, before I go too far, I want to tell you I've been hinting at this a little while, and I'm going to do it again. I am so excited about what we are working on. There is going to be a major shift in how things go at Chiro Business Mojo. We're going to continue providing you wonderful interviews with great guests week after week, but we're going to add an extra layer to the fun. I can't wait to announce it, so stay tuned. It is coming soon. Well, today on the show, I have got Dr. Tom Potisk. He operated a highly successful multi-DC family practice for 25 years. He's been elected Chiropractor of the Year by his state association, and he's been proclaimed America's most successful chiropractor by several media sources. Dr. Tom's mission is to empower DCs to gain more growth, income, and stability in their personal and professional lives. Welcome, Dr. Tom Potisk.
Hello there. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I invite you to jump in and fill in any gaps in that bio that I may have missed.
Oh, well, it sounds like you covered most of it, but one of the latest exciting things I'm up to is I've been elected president of the Gonstead Clinic Foundation just recently. The Gonstead Clinic is here in Wisconsin in the little town of Mount Horeb, just about a half hour west of Madison, our state capital. And I think that's probably one of the most famous names in chiropractic, Gonstead, and one of the most world-renowned clinics in chiropractic history, also probably right behind the BJ Clinic in Davenport, the original one. And it's still operating. It's still there. It's the clinic, the second clinic that Gonstead built, finished in 1964. So we just recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of that clinic, and it's a nonprofit foundation now that's operating that to restore it and preserve it and keep it functioning as a chiropractic clinic, treating, adjusting patients, and also teaching. So I'm happy to be involved with that right now, and we can talk about some more of that maybe a little later in our conversation.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that, and thanks for bringing us up to speed on what's going on with that clinic that Dr. Gonstead opened. Let's go back to the past. Let's talk specifically about your past. Why did you become a chiropractor?
Well, I am one of many chiropractors that I've met over the years that was motivated to become a chiropractor by the original 60 Minutes documentary about chiropractic. I believe it was in 1982. That was the first time that chiropractic was seriously and very detailed featured on television in that 60 Minutes program with Morley Safer. It was orchestrated by the AMA as part of their anti-chiropractic conspiracy to eliminate and destroy the profession, which is really sad. There's a whole story behind that. But I watched that program. I was a pre-med student studying organic chemistry on my kitchen table, and the TV was on in the living room quite loud so I could hear what was on, and I can still hear that clock ticking in my head, and Morley Safer saying something like, are you fed up with your health care? Are you frustrated with your medical doctor just giving you pills and maybe recommending surgery? Well, there's a new doctor on the block, and these are chiropractors. So that caught my attention, and I closed that big, fat organic chemistry book, and I went and sat and watched that program. And even though it was as negative as you can imagine, they did introduce the principle and talked about the philosophy, and they interviewed patients that were satisfied. So the very next morning, I went to the school library, I looked up chiropractic, and there were 4 books in the library, all negative. I read those, but I caught the bug, and I went to visit a chiropractor, and then off I went, and I never looked back. So I've met many chiropractors that were motivated by that negative program. And it goes to show you, as BJ said, I think he said something like, say whatever you want about me, just spell my name right.
Yeah, and it's interesting that philosophy that really promotes conservative care over, more extreme measures is cast in a negative light so often. But I'm glad that it's made so much progress since that time, and certainly, hopefully, it will make even more. Let's talk about that moment from when you graduate. You walk across that stage and you get your diploma, and your family is there and your friends, and it's such a proud moment, but you're embarking on your next phase. And I know it's been a career and it's hard to boil down, but briefly give us the highlights of that path from the moment you graduated to where you are today.
Listen, I was a quivering mass of nervousness and anxiety with cold, sweaty hands. BJ wrote a green book called Up From Below the Bottom, which I'd highly recommend that all chiropractors read. And that book seems like it was written about me. You know, it was written long before I was born. But you get my point is that I was starting at the bottom. I was just a mess. I had no confidence. I was afraid to adjust anybody. Honestly, my hands were wet and cold and sweaty. I remember in the BJ or at the Palmer Clinic during my internship, I was running to the bathroom to run hot water over my hands before I would lay them on any patients. I was so self-conscious about that. And one of the days I was wearing some light tan cowboy boots. Don't laugh, that was the style back in the early 80s. And I was wearing those, and one of the staff doctors, was watching me adjust a patient, looked down at my boots and said, "Oh, you must have stepped in some water. My cowboy boots had these water marks all over them." And I said, "Yeah, I stepped in a puddle." Well, I lied. That was the sweat that was rolling down my body into my boots and coming out the seams. I was just a mess, and I made it. I worked on myself, and I went to visit other chiropractors, and we'll talk some more about these things. And, I came up from below the bottom. And I know there's doctors listening right now that have anxiety and fear and just nervousness and incongruency and just aren't right about themselves. And there's hope is what I'm telling you. I did it, and I think anybody can.
Well, today you're coaching chiropractors on how they can become more successful in practice, and I'm sure you're probably implementing and teaching a lot of those keys to your success you've had over the years. So, in a nutshell, what's your approach to coaching?
Well, I don't have any specific protocols or procedures. A doctor was just asking me the other day the same question, and I said, well, I'm pretty much easygoing, and I can help you with whatever you want. It depends on what you're after. I mean, there's some things I can't help doctors with, and I do say no sometimes, but mine is pretty much just relaxed kind of coaching. I start by just talking to a doctor with a complimentary consultation, maybe for about a half hour, mostly asking them questions about where they're at and what they want. And like I said, sometimes I've got to say no. I just don't have the capacity or the or desire to help some people with what they're after. But most of them are looking for help with their financial difficulties. That's real common. Difficulties managing their staff. That's another common one. Sometimes there's doctors that have real sad stories. They've been working for years, 20, 30 years, and they want to retire. They have to retire. Their bodies are worn out. They're just stressed out, and they just can't go on any longer. And sadly, they just can't. They made some major mistakes in their practice, and they're just stuck working. And they know they got to stop or slow down, and they just feel like they can't. That's a real common question that I get because I retired quite early at age 46 very successfully, and that word kind of got around, and doctors want to know, how did you do that? So that's a real common thing that I help doctors with. So my approach is an open, relaxed one, just starting talking to docs, asking them questions, and then going from there.
Well, is there any common trait that you see in the folks that are struggling and not achieving the success that they wanted?
Yeah, there's a couple of common threads. A couple of them are lack of commitment and determination. That's a real common one, and it's a difficult one to deal with. They want the success, but they don't often want to do what's necessary to have it. And that's a difficult one to get them to realize that. There's a lot of different facets to being successful. The secret of being successful is that there's no secret. That sounds kind of funny, but there is no secret. It's a multifaceted blend of a number of different things that we can talk about. And that's probably the most common thing I see is lack of commitment and determination, being willing to do what's necessary to get what they want.
And I guess the other component, at least one that I can think of, is you have that determination, you have that will, and then you need the knowledge of what it is you need to be doing. So is there any particular piece of that you can share with us? What should chiropractors be doing if they do have that will?
Well, I think you're exactly right there. You don't want to try to reinvent the wheel. Many others have done it before you if you're struggling. So one of the ways that I improved myself in what I'm doing is I would seek out doctors that were successful, and then I would try to get in their space. You'll find that most successful doctors are very open and willing to share their experience and advice. The few that you run into that aren't, you'll find out usually are not worth spending time with anyway. They're probably not as successful as they portray themselves to be. So I think listening to podcasts like this with the successful doctors that you interview, meeting doctors in your community that you perceive to be successful, they kind of stand out. And oftentimes they're very humble. The ones that are truly successful are quite often very humble, not always, but the most successful ones that I found are that way. They're usually the quiet ones in the back of the room that don't brag or don't show off very much. Those are the ones that I think I learned most from, and I could relate to very well, probably because I'm humble. Some people have accused me of being humble to a fault, but I have found that I learned the most from those quiet doctors that are not real obvious. You got to kind of dig a little bit to find those. They're usually at the back of the room being quiet. That's what I have found to be true.
Well, do you mind sharing with us some of the things that you did in practice that allowed you to retire at such a young age?
Well, going right back to the very beginning there, one of the issues that I struggled with were communication skills, and I find that to be so common with doctors that are struggling. For some of us, for me, for example, I had a severe fear of public speaking. And it's difficult to be successful in chiropractic if you're not going to reach out in your community and speak out about what you have to offer. So I graduated with that fear. Somehow I made it all the way through graduation as a chiropractor without ever really having to get up in front of a group and speak. Somehow I dodged that. And I can remember opportunities that came up, especially in undergraduate school. And, when it was my turn to get up in front of the class, I was sick that day very conveniently, or I just didn't do it. Somehow I got out of it. So I went through all of that without ever having to get up in front of a group. So now I'm going into practice seeing that there are huge advantages to being able to do that. And I got to work on myself. I joined a Toastmasters, which is a good idea. Nearly every community has that, and it's very inexpensive and very good. I took Dale Carnegie. That's another excellent thing to take for those who want to improve their communication skills. And I took some other communication classes at my community colleges. And, I got to work on that, and I overcame it, and I got to be quite good at it. So it's another example of coming up from below the bottom. I know doctors struggle with that fear, and I can tell all of you listening that, you can overcome that and do very well with learning how to speak out in the public and improving your communication skills, not only on a group basis, but one-on-one too, then with your patients and then with your staff. So getting to work on yourself with your communication skills, I think, is a very key component to success, and that's what I have to do with myself.
Well, if I were to come to you and say, I've got basically an average practice, I might see 15 or 20 folks a day, and I think that's a pretty good week, but it's not where I want to be. I'm not living in the house that, I want to live in, and maybe taking the vacations that I would like to take, and just not providing for myself the dream or vision that I had early on. How would you sort of coach me initially to help me work through that and find areas where I could improve?
Well, that's one of the questions I would be asking you is just what's your definition of success? Just what specifically are you after, whether it's more money, more time off, you want to retire, you want to have a better staff, you want to change the quality of the patients that you've got, maybe going from more of a pain relief-oriented practice to more of a wellness, maintenance, vitalistic type practice. Then I would ask a doctor, what do you think is keeping you from obtaining those? Because sometimes doctors know what it is and they just need help finding solutions to that. And then I've learned also, after you get those pieces of information from a doctor, especially on what's limiting them, is get permission to ask their staff and their spouse or significant other that same question. Ask them what's limiting this doctor from the success that they want to have. And a lot of times you'll find completely different answers from what the doctor will tell you. And that's very revealing. I've had a couple of doctors tell me that, that they don't feel confident in their technical skills, that they don't feel that they're helping patients to the degree that they think that they should. And then I go and talk to the staff and they say, oh, this is an excellent doctor. We hear such great input from the patients about how much help he gives to them. So a lot of times the doctor's not realizing just how good they are, and you've got to conquer that, and doing so moves them forward quite a bit. That's just one example. So if you can get into a doctor's staff and get permission for that and talk to them, a lot of times you'll get some key information about how to help that doctor.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned staff. CA can either, I think, make or break a practice, really. And so those are very pivotal folks in our practices. What else would you recommend in helping us to really get the most out of our CAs?
Well, I think it's important to be having a staff meeting at least once a week, or I should say at least twice a month. Once a week is better. We had one about every week, sometimes every 2 weeks. Under certain circumstances, and really empower them and let them speak about what can be done to improve the practice and the patient flow and the communication and the marketing. They have a lot of things to offer the practice, and I think they need to be heard. And when you let them speak out, you really do empower them and make them feel more important. And you'll find that they'll be a lot more productive, especially if you can implement some of the things they suggest. You can't always do that. Sometimes their requests are not doable, but oftentimes you can implement a lot of their suggestions, and a lot of times those suggestions are just golden. So I think having meetings with them on a group basis like that, and letting them open up and letting them have a little bit more control of the practice is very good. And I think then also to incentivize them so that they get some of the rewards when the practice grows, set some goals. And when you get to that goal, then have a reward and ask them what kind of rewards they want. Oftentimes it's not money. They want a better quality water cooler, for example, or they want, a better break area, or they want a trip, maybe even a group trip with the staff to go someplace, or even to just go and celebrate a little bit in your own community, going out to an event somehow to celebrate as a group. So ask them what they want as an incentive to produce more. Those things were very productive and helpful in my practice, and I get a lot of doctors on that program to improve those staff meetings, and that's a big help to the practice, almost pretty consistently, I would say.
Well, I want to shift gears here and talk about marketing of the practices. And I know that you mentioned communicating, being able to speak in groups. But let's break it down for internal and external marketing. What top tip do you have or thing we should do, I guess, to market to the folks that are already in our practice and then to take that message wider to the community?
This is a good topic for me to speak on. I did a lot of marketing. A lot of doctors asked me how I had such a successful practice, with such a high volume and successful staff and numerous associates and a big family practice. I didn't have the highest volume. I know there's doctors that saw more than I did, but I had a very significant practice there. And doctors asked me, how did you do that? And one of my first answers is that I did a lot of marketing. I had to make up for some of my technical deficiencies. I wasn't the greatest adjuster. I was pretty good, but a lot of doctors are better than I was. So I had to make up for that, and I did it with marketing, and I did almost every kind of marketing you can imagine, television and radio and internet things and mailings and newspaper. The only thing I didn't do was dinner with the docs. And now that I see how that works for many doctors, I wish I would have done that. I think that would have boosted my practice even some more. But as far as what doctors should be doing, a new doc, freshly out of school, should do what I did, because your budget's probably pretty limited. Get out of your office and meet people in your community. If you're just sitting around right now listening and you don't have any patients scheduled for a while, after this interview, I want you to put a sign on your door that says, I'll be back by let's say right now it's 9:30. I'll be back by 11:30, and put a sign on your door, because there's nobody coming in anyway. and then go out and meet people. Go right down your street and take your business cards and go and say hello to your neighbors on your street. That's a huge thing. And you'll find that they're all very welcoming and happy to know that you're in the community and what you're doing. You'll get some referrals from that. Some of them will become patients probably on the spot. You can bet that there are people looking for you and what you've got. That's what I have found. So get out and meet people. Get involved in the community. If there's a Chamber of Commerce, get involved with that. If there's some community groups like the Lions, which I was involved with, the Lions Club. I think most communities have that. The Kiwanis, the JCs. There's all kinds of civic groups out there, church community and organizations that you can get involved with if you belong to a church or you want to join a church. Get involved with that. There's all kinds of benefits that don't cost anything for a doctor to start boosting their practice right there. So get out and meet people. For an experienced doc that's got a practice that's maybe kind of stuck, I have found one thing that boosts a lot of practice is get something in your community's parade. Almost every community has a parade. And what better opportunity to show off your practice in a parade? You've got hundreds, if not thousands, of families there that are enthusiastic, and it's a festive mood, and they're there to see what's going on in the community, and there's lots of other businesses showing off their business. And get something in the parade, whether it's just handing out flyers or handing out coupons, dressing up a little bit and marching down the parade with a couple of signs. You've all probably been familiar with the giant spine that B.J. Palmer had in the Davenport parade, advertising the Palmer College. There's old pictures of that you'll find on the internet and in the green books. Well, when I saw that gave me the idea to get a giant spine in my community's parade. And Palmer was renting theirs out for a while because they've got one that they use in the Bix run, which is I think a 5K run in Davenport. And they used to have the students run with that giant spine, and it made a big impact. And they were renting that out to chiropractors around the country. But that was expensive and difficult to transport because it was solid vertebrae that the students were carrying around. So I came up with my own idea, and I made a giant spine out of flexible foam that assembles and disassembles with Velcro and then lays flat, and you can get the whole spine in the back of a minivan or a pickup truck. So I made one of those, and that was a big hit for my practice. I think we got 100 new patients out of putting that giant spine in our community's parade, handing out coupons and flyers, marching that down Main Street in our town. We got on the first page of our community's paper. It was on the radio and on the television. Big hit. So doctors in my community found out about that, and they started asking me to make those for them. So I did. And now I think I've got those giant spines in over 26 states and over 115 communities, and I think we've sent them off to 4 different countries. That's called the Giant Spine Parade and Event Costume. You can find it on the internet if you search it, and you can find it on Facebook. There's a Facebook page for that. So get involved in your community's parade. A lot of doctors neglect that, and it's an opportunity to boost your practice very inexpensively.
Well, let's talk about 2 pieces of advice for 2 different people, and maybe it's the same piece of advice, but the show is broken down into 2 different kinds of listeners. We've got the newbies who are just starting, and then those folks who have been in practice, like you said, and maybe they're stuck or looking for a direction that's different than the path that they're on. So if there is one thing that they could both do tomorrow, what would that be for each of them?
One thing they could both do tomorrow, I think it would go back to just meeting people in your community. Nothing seems to work better than a personal contact. You know, if you're even slightly congruent, if you're even slightly excited about chiropractic and what it can do for people, people pick up on that, especially nowadays. The current trend is authenticity, and I think most chiropractors have got pretty significant authenticity, and they need to show that off. They have at least some confidence in what they're doing. And if you just go out and meet people and very casually just introduce yourself and say that you're a chiropractor, you know, people will ask and be interested in that. People are looking for people like us. I'm certain of that more than ever right now. There's more opportunities right now for chiropractors than I think there has ever been before. I'm very optimistic about chiropractic and what it's going to be doing in the future. I know there's still difficulties with defining what we do, and there's arguments among chiropractors, and we are our own worst enemy. But aside from all that, this is such a tremendous profession. I still don't think that there's a better one after my 30 plus years being involved with it. I think there's still tremendous potential. I think chiropractic practices are going to be doubling in the future in volume and in productivity. So just get out and meet people. It doesn't cost anything. Most doctors are locked up in their offices, and then they take care of the patients that they've got, and then they go home. I think that's got to change. Doctors need to get out in the community. You got to get involved in your Chamber of Commerce. I started in that, and I worked myself right up to the presidency of my community's Chamber of Commerce, and that was a big boost to my practice. And just being yourself and letting people ask questions and just letting them see that you're just a regular person with a big idea that's fresh and that you've got what people are looking for. You don't have to get into the philosophy in any detail. Keep it simple. And when people ask you questions, maybe start out by just answering their questions, which are usually going to be about pain, because that's most people's perception about chiropractic, sadly, at this point. We all know that it's a lot more than just that, but it's okay to talk about relieving pain for people. That's significant, and it's a way to start. And I think that that's the best thing for any doctor to do, whether if you're fresh out of school or been in practice a long time, is get out and meet more people in your community. You can't go wrong.
Well, you have had a lot of success in your life, and we've talked about ways we can be more successful in this show so far. Let's take a step back to the bigger picture of really success in general. And we learn so much from our successes, but we tend to learn even more from our failures or the obstacles and challenges that we've overcome in life. So is there something like that you could share with us, either chiropractically related or not, and what you learned and how you overcame that challenge?
As I said earlier, success is very multi-talented. The secret of success is that there's no secret. I'll tell you a couple of words that are involved with being successful. It's planning. It's improving your skills. It's learning from pros. It's then implementing what you've learned. It's reevaluating and then making changes. It's about being sincere and congruent and getting enough rest. Those are all involved in being successful, and the amount of success that you want varies. You know, I had a lady that I talked to not too long ago, and all she really wanted was to see maybe 20 to 30 patients a week for a few hours, and then spend the rest of the time with her family, because she had 4 small children, but she wanted to be both. She wanted to be a very good mother, and then she wanted to at least be helping a few people. So in order to do that, I had to set her up with a practice with associates so that they would generate enough to support having an office, because there's expenses, you know, there's rent and utilities and such. And the few people that she was able to see wasn't enough to support that. So for her, that was success, to just be able to have an office and see 20 to 40 patients a week. Another doctor called me, and they were one of these who was kind of stuck practicing 35 years, and because of some mistakes that they made, they were not able to let go. They needed to keep practicing. Well, we had to work hard on that, getting them associates again, and finding one that'll take over their practice. That's called there's a book called Good to Great, which I highly recommend, by Jim Collins. That's one of my favorite books that I would recommend to chiropractors. And there's a whole section in there about finding somebody to take over for you. That's the key to retiring successfully. So success is so multifaceted, it's difficult to talk about, but those words that I said are all part of the multifaceted aspect of success, and then it just depends on what you want to do.
Well, who are your personal heroes?
You know, I think my personal heroes are all the DCs, all the chiropractors who persevered during the AMA's anti-chiropractic campaign. I've always had a specific interest in that. I've studied it, and I'm writing a book about it called Sore Throat, probably to be released in the spring. It's a historical novel about that anti-chiropractic AMA campaign. It's just one of the dirtiest things I think I've ever seen. And that was between the 1940s and then ending about 1985. So I caught the tail end of that when I first started practicing. There was so much negativity. You know, I would go out and meet people, and the negative aspects that were portrayed by the AMA would come up, like, you know, you guys aren't real doctors, and I heard you hurt people, and I heard that you guys take too many x-rays. And that was all nonsense portrayed by the AMA to discredit us. So I really have a lot of respect for doctors who persevered during that campaign, which lasted about 35 to 40 years. That was very stressful for them, but they hung in there and they stuck with practicing against all that negativity. I have so much respect for doctors that did that. A lot of them even went to jail, and there's a few of those guys still around. So those are my personal heroes. If I could give all of them a gold medal, I would.
Well, is there anything that you do on a daily basis that helps you really be successful and maintain success? Things like affirmations, rituals, or any other habits you do?
There is. For one thing, I'm a Christian, and I read my Bible every day, and that is so motivating to me. I'm a student of the Bible. I go to a men's Bible study every week, and I try to read at least a little bit of the Bible every day. I like going on this website called BibleGateway.com. You can get a Bible scripture there every day, and a lot of times those are so appropriate to what I'm doing. I think those are there for a reason for most of us. So get into the Word if you're a Christian. If you're not, I would still highly recommend looking at it, because I think you'll find more truth there than you will anywhere else. Other things I do is my wife and I, we try to practice what we preach. So we don't eat perfectly every day. Our lifestyle isn't perfect. We like to splurge and have some cake and maybe an alcoholic beverage on occasion. But a couple of things we definitely do is we have a big salad every single day. We even make a meal out of it by adding some healthy protein, like some oily fish or some walnuts or some almonds or a hard-boiled egg to that salad. We exercise and get physical activity every day, and we vary it because one of the most common reasons people don't keep that up is boredom. So, maybe one day we'll go for a walk, another day we'll go for a bike ride, another day we'll swim if that's available, another day we'll cross-country ski. We live here in Wisconsin, so we're looking forward to our first snowfall, and that looks like it's coming this weekend, so we'll get our cross-country skis out. But we work at getting some physical activity and exercise every single day, and I think that's so important to get out and move, especially for chiropractors, because for most of us, it's a physical job, and I think we need to be taking better care of ourselves physically, especially our structure that way. I get adjusted at least once a week, sometimes more, just as maintenance and wellness. I feel great. I'm 55 years old, and I get people that tell me all the time that I look and move like I'm in my 30s. But I work at that. I don't go to yoga, but I have taken yoga, and I incorporate all of what I've learned. It's my own little routine. I stretch every day in the morning on the floor. I do some deep breathing. That's been very helpful to me. I do read a bit of chiropractic philosophy. I'm not a fanatic about it. I have read the green books. I don't read them regularly. I've never read them all, but I do listen to podcasts like this about philosophy, and I go to philosophy seminars, and I find that so motivating. There's all kinds of things to learn there that can be helpful to your practice. So I think doctors really need to work at all of that, and I think that's one of the keys to success is putting effort into all those things.
Yeah, all of it certainly does require effort, and I really agree with your point about keeping ourselves in some sort of physical shape, not only because the job is physically demanding, but I think we have more credibility in the realm of healthcare when we are healthier ourselves.
Absolutely. And when I was talking earlier about asking doctors, what's holding you back, and then I asked them, do you mind if I ask your spouse or your significant other and your staff that same question? It may help me. Once in a while, a doctor will say no, that they don't want me to talk to them. And that's usually a clue right there that doctor is incongruent, that they're not practicing what they preach, and they're ashamed, and they don't want me to find out about it. So doctors, if you're hesitant about somebody asking your staff, your significant other, your spouse about what might be holding you back, I'd say start looking into your congruency. You may not be as authentic as you should be. So that's a little hint right there for you docs that are listening.
Well, we are fast approaching the end of this interview, but before you go, we have a few final thoughts. What's the best business advice you've ever received?
The best business advice I ever received, I think it's probably from a doctor in northern Wisconsin that I visited. And he was one of these very humble types, very much kind of low-key. Not too many doctors knew about him, but I heard that he had a 6-week waiting list for new patients. So I had to find this guy and go out of my way to go visit this doc. And he asked me to not use his name because he doesn't want a lot of doctors coming out to see him. But he does have that, very rare in chiropractic, to have a 6-week waiting list for doctors that want to come and see you. So I went and saw him, and one of the pieces of advice that he gave to me was, listen, Doc, he said, everything's going to be okay. He said, I know you got difficulties, and we talked about some of my struggles. And he said, everything's going to be okay. And that put me at such ease to see this doc who was just a regular person. And he said, listen, Doc, just relax, because he could sense my stress and my anxiety. And he said, everything's going to be okay. So I know doctors are listening to this right now, looking to improve themselves. And I'm going to tell you, doctors, everything is going to be okay. But you do need to take action with the things that you're learning.
Well, what is the best way for people to connect with you, find out more about what it is that you do?
Well, I've got a website, and it's tompotisk.com. That's my name, TOMPOTISK.com. There's information there. I've written a couple books for the general public. One of them is called Whole Health Healing. And then I've written a book for chiropractors called Reclaim the Joy of Practice. It's an advanced guide for advancing doctors. That's available there and also on Amazon. And then I'm on Facebook. Look me up, Tom Potisk. And you'll find that giant spine costume if you look up giant spine chiropractic costume, and you can reach me that way. And I'm always looking forward to talking to chiropractors. Everybody's welcome to contact me on email or give me a call. I love talking with DCs.
Well, Dr. Tom Potisk, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom with us, and thank you again for everything that you do for the profession, the people that you are helping each and every day to become better chiropractors and better representation, or better representatives, I guess, of our profession.
And thank you, Richard, for what you're doing with this podcast and other things you're involved with. I know you're part of the movement to improve chiropractic, and thank you on behalf of the profession. We love you.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.